Hey everyone, it's Will, Gamer Dad, with another video for you. So first off, I'd like to wish everyone who celebrates, Lunar New Year, good wishes, good wealth, good fortune, good health, and of course, great gacha pulls in not only Another Eden, but in any of the other games that you may be playing over the course of this year. Now in this farming results video over the last 5 weeks, I of course will not only show you what I've gotten and discuss some of my goals in terms of farming and things. Of course, this is almost like a tableside talk where I usually share some random thoughts of Gamer Dad. Now if you haven't already, make sure you like and subscribe to my channel, I really appreciate it. I also do have a Patreon account for those who want to support me this way. So since it's over the course of 5 weeks, what I had been working on previously is to farm Total Theater World in order to get Aisha to 120, which you've all seen me use in action. After that, I actually took a break and am currently working in Man-Eating Marsh very hard. The reason for that is not really to work on Cyrus's Light, but more to work on Alma's True VC Grasta. Not only that, but for those who are in the end game and trying to farm special crystals and special fragments in order to upgrade their VC Grasta and True VC Grasta, you need tomes to shred, and unfortunately Total Theater World does not have any of those, and so you do have to alternate between the two of those if you are planning to do things like that during the end game. In terms of my red keys, that's what I'm doing. In terms of my green keys, all I'm doing is running present day Garlia until the new main story update comes out. I have finished 255 Altina, Gario, as well as Serene, and therefore there aren't any other green dungeons that I can do other than present day working on Azami and grinding out her light. Now, as for the thought of this video, since we are now on the eve of Another Eden Global's 4-year anniversary, I kind of want to talk about, almost like reflecting upon a long-term relationship. I've been playing this game, of course, since day 1 of Global, and so over the 4 years, things have changed. I would say the vast majority of it has changed for the better. I would say a couple of things have probably changed for the worse, and of course, much of it is really the same, and as long as you like the games, the play style, and so on and so forth, like myself, I will continue to support the game both by creating content as well as continuing to play to the best of my ability. Now, first of all, for those who are newer members of the channel or have just started playing the game, some of these thoughts that I'm going to share with you may not have been applicable, and I'll tell you what I mean. So, for those who have been joining me from day 1, you'll know that when we first started Another Eden Global, there were only like 6 5-stars in the game. The OG 6, I should call it. So, you got Xion, you got Tuva, Suzette, Mariel, Lokito, as well as Mighty. And of course, it took a while to kind of add. The first new gacha unit was Annabelle. And then finally we got Leclerc and so on and so forth, and it took off from there. The first real challenges came when we were doing things like Other Lands, where it was very restrictive as to what kind of teams you need to bring in. For example, in the first Other Lands, we had Other Lands Barakai. You essentially needed a certain specific team comp, otherwise, even as a free-to-play or with some gacha units, it was not easily beatable, or in some cases not beatable at all. I remember that it was Varus that we had to take on, and it was rough. Now, in our, I would say that over the course of that year and moving forward, we had our first collab. We had the P5. More and more gacha units came out. Of course, we had our first zone, Fire Zone, followed by Water Zone, and of course, you know how it goes now with tons and tons of different zones. We also had the first AS unit, AS Suzette. And of course, now we've seen many, many more of them. In terms of our first ES unit, that came a lot later, Extra Style, and you've seen those now very, very common. In year 3 onwards, we had things like, obviously the altars coming from missiles. We've had now new types of zones upcoming, Sea of Stars, and I think in the main story part 3, we'll have different zones as well. So things have gone a long way. We have Grasta, obviously, and that is really the game changer to make sure you can do mega DPS. Now, you're probably wondering, wow, Gamer Dad, you're kind of boring. What's the point of reviewing history? It's kind of interesting just looking at the struggles that I had as a early player versus newer players out there. And what I mean by that is that in year one for us, without any collab units and very limited resources in order to get gacha units, if you didn't pull at least one unit and essentially not have Mariel, endgame was not very pleasant. And I think that actually forced a lot of players to either put the game on hold, reduce their time investment in the game, or quit the game altogether. I would say that there, even at times, the other lands were just so frustrating. Even story bosses were very, very difficult without the right team comp. And when I say right team comp, literally you have to be lucky enough to get the right gacha units, because there were only 6 and then eventually 10, 12, 15. I mean, and not only that, we had no ads or very few ads. We only had the one ad, so you only got 40 stones a day. Nowadays, we probably get 70, 80 a day. Plus, there's a lot more content that drops. So we get free bonuses, for example, and other increased logins. Man, things were really, really rough. You should actually check out my history of the channel, in the fact that if you watch my first summon video or my first account review where I showed 179 total pulls, the 5 stars you see there, man, if you had those now, I don't even think you can play through the game. You all are so spoiled with the things like, obviously, you have a Flam, 0 MP cost, farming, and, even without Grasta, you could breeze through all the story, and most of probably the side content. And for us, of course, not only that there was very limited side content, it was difficult at every step of the way. So it's very interesting how things have changed. I think back to what I was talking about in terms of my experience versus newer players, I think WFS actually made it a lot of improvements for newer players to make it easier. Pulling any of the more recent gacha units will essentially catch you up in the fact that you could easily get through most of the main story, if not all of it. As long as you're patient, you could be able to walk through and work through all those different mythoses and collabs and add lots and lots of 5 stars, and they're guaranteed 5 stars to your team. Now, I know that some people were complaining about the power levels of some of the newer Tales of and so on and so forth, but I mean, the fact that we have extra 4 free 5 stars there, and of course things like the complex stream and other things, is really, really, it makes things a lot easier. Your game doesn't have to depend on unlucky or lucky pulls on the gacha. And so WFS has really did a home run with not only the number of collabs, just the fact that the sheer number of free 5 stars makes it very viable for free-to-play strategies. I mean, if you watch the original free-to-play strategies that were out there, and I think the premier one that I can think of is a channel called Minodyne. You probably have heard of him in your travels. Those strategies were very few and far between. But nowadays, if you look and search on YouTube, F2P, you'll find tons of free-to-play strats. And the reason for that is, let's be honest, the power level of the free units has come a long way. And so, again, I really think that WFS has done very well to attract new players, make it less frustrating for them. And another thing I will say about the game in general that has been exceptional is the story. Now, I can argue that obviously the first 26 chapters were a lot more in depth, finding out about the origins of Aldo, Eden, and so on and so forth. Things have been a little bit more, shall I say, lacking at times in the main story or in the side quests. However, overall, I would say the story writing is still top-notch, and it's actually one of the main reasons I still play the game. Now, for some of you who've played it on and off and don't really like, having to actually play the story or read the story, I can understand this game's not necessarily for you. But for people who are really enjoying the involvement of every character, kind of the story progression as well as the character progression and development, that is one other strong point that if WFS continues on with that, will continue to make Another Eden one of the best games out there. Thirdly, of course, the soundtrack, top-notch as always, nothing wrong there. Now, one of the few complaints I have about Another Eden in general is I've actually reflected upon how I feel about the game in terms of what I don't like as much. And one thing I don't like as much, surprisingly, are the boss fights. Now, the super boss fights have been pretty crazy, even in the first few years, but nothing to the level of some of the warped fights and some of the other crazy fights out there. I mean, Hachos, Guerrilla fights, all those horrors and super special bosses that have all those weapons, they were difficult in their own right, but never felt that it was impossible to beat without a cheat guide or cheat mode. One of the last bosses I have not beaten, Warped Hellkale, is one of those few bosses. It's just like, I'm sure I could figure it out, but it was so frustrating, and I'm sure you've heard me say this before. It's so frustrating. The mechanics are annoying, and yeah, I'm sure, again, I can copy some other people's strategies and so on and so forth. I want to do this myself, and that is one thing that I feel that WFS has made more frustrating, and part of that is the other complaint I have about the game, which can't be helped, let's be honest. As the game progresses and everyone wants more and more powerful and awesome units, that comes as a price, right? As the units get more powerful, in order to give top-notch players, unlike myself, a good challenge, they also have to make the bosses more ridiculous. Things like, 90% type shields guaranteed, like the Divine Tree, for example. Or, 100% resist unless you start putting Banish or, type down, physical down, and you need a lot of those. It makes things less fun, because instead of just being like the old bosses where you just have to find out the pattern, mitigate, plan around the attacks, and they were annoying as heck at times, it wasn't like, well, let's just get one-shotted or have the background hurt you, in some of the warp fights and so on and so forth. So as much as, I've always enjoyed a great challenge when it comes to super boss fights, I can't say I enjoy them nearly as much now. And so I do apologize for not taking down the last boss. I always give myself, ample time to kind of try things out, and I'm sure I'll come back to it, but for now, I'm going to leave that one on hold. It just was a very frustrating experience for me, and maybe I just lost my touch when it comes to taking down bosses, but that one was just ridiculous. Anyway, so, and finally, like I said, the power creep is something that does bother me a little bit. I'm a little bit concerned about both the offensive and defensive power creep, just the type of damage modifiers out there, the expectations that not only newer players have, but also veteran players, and say like, oh, if you're not getting 100 million hit in one hit, it's really not doing that much damage. Or let's be honest, we'll compare everything to a 3000 mod like Neptune, and if it's worse than that, I'm not even going to bother. Or, if we can't use the most powerful units such as AS Yifa or Ultra Xion, and it doesn't pair well, or, the one team, or, all those kind of things, the fact that we had joked around about what the one team is, which of course is AS Radius, Ultra Xion, Alma, and AS Yifa, the fact that that's out there where 4 units can be paired together like a group of superheroes makes things kind of ridiculous, and makes you kind of think about the state of the game in that sense. Now for myself, I've noticed that my feelings towards the game has changed, mostly because I'm more of a collector now, instead of fully optimizing my team. And I think as long as you find something that you like from the game, you'll continue to play it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.